Sarah Chun stood at the window of her ranger station, watching the first rays of sunlight paint Clearwater Mountain in shades of amber and gold. The early morning quiet was broken by the sudden crackle of her radio, causing the coffee in her hand to slosh dangerously close to the rim of her mug. "Sarah, you there? We've got a situation on Thunder Ridge Trail." Jack Cooper's voice, usually calm and steady, carried an edge she hadn't heard in years. Setting down her coffee, Sarah grabbed her radio. "Go ahead, Jack." Multiple hikers reporting an injured black bear blocking the trail about 2 miles in from the north entrance. "She's acting aggressive. Won't back down even with the usual deterrence." Thompson family tried rattling their bear spray canister. Didn't even flinch. "She's just standing her ground." Sarah's mind immediately began cataloging the unusual behavior. In her 20 years as a wildlife ranger at Sierra National Park, she'd handled countless bear encounters. Black bears typically avoided human contact, choosing flight over confrontation every time. This was different. "Any visible injuries?" she asked, already moving to gather her gear. Hikers reported blood on her left side. Hard to tell how serious without getting closer, but she's favoring that side pretty heavily. Sarah pulled her tranquilizer kit from the storage locker, methodically checking each component. "Have you cleared the trail?" "Yeah. Got everyone out safely. Posted warnings at all access points and stationed Rangers Mitchell and Rodriguez at the trailheads." "But Sarah," Jack paused, and she could hear him choosing his words carefully. "Something's off about this one. She's not just aggressive. It's like she's guarding something. Never seen anything quite like it." The weight of the tranquilizer gun felt familiar in Sarah's hands as she clipped it to her belt. "I'm heading out now. Keep the trails closed and maintain the perimeter. No one gets through until we assess the situation." "Copy that. I'll meet you at the north entrance base camp in 15. Sarah grabbed her field pack, double-checking her medical supplies and Bear Protocol's handbook. As she headed for her truck, she couldn't shake the feeling that this call would be anything but routine. The combination of aggressive behavior and potential injury could make for a volatile situation, especially with the summer hiking season in full swing. The early morning mist created ghostly shapes among the ancient pines as Sarah pulled her truck into the north entrance parking lot. Jack was already there, his tall frame leaning against his vehicle, along with Tom Martinez, the newest member of their ranger team. Fresh out of wildlife management school, Tom had been with them for just 6 months, but he'd already proven himself level-headed in crisis situations. "What's the latest?" Sarah asked, grabbing her gear from the back seat. The tranquilizer gun was a reassuring weight against her hip, though she hoped she wouldn't need it. Tom stepped forward, his dark eyes alert and worried. His rookie status showed in the way he clutched his tablet too tightly, but his voice remained steady. "Bear's still in the same location, about 50 yards past the Ridgeview overlook. I did a careful approach about 20 minutes ago. She's definitely injured. Blood on her left flank, and the way she's moving suggests possible deep tissue damage. Any signs of infection? Disorientation?" Sarah pulled out her own tablet, already logging the initial observations. "That's the strange part," Tom said, swiping through photos on his device. "Despite the injury, she seems completely lucid. Her movements are purposeful, almost calculated. She keeps returning to the same spot, even when we try to guide her away with noise." Jack nodded, his weathered face creased with concern. "I've been working these trails for 3 decades, Sarah. Never seen behavior quite like this. It's like she's violated every predictable pattern we know about black bears." Sarah studied the photos Tom had taken. The bear was indeed larger than average for a female black bear in their region, her dark fur matted with blood and dirt around the visible wound. But it was the bear's eyes that caught Sarah's attention. They showed none of the wild, unfocused look of an injured animal. Instead, they appeared alert, determined, almost calculating. "Show me," she said, adjusting her utility belt. The 3 rangers moved silently along the trail, their boots crunching softly on the gravel path. The morning air was cool and damp, carrying the sweet scent of pine needles and the musty undertone of wet earth. As they approached the Ridgeview overlook, Sarah raised her hand, signaling them to stop. "Tom, take the high ground," she whispered, pointing to a rocky outcrop that would give them a better vantage point. "Jack, circle wide to the left. I want eyes from all angles before we get any closer." As her colleagues moved into position, Sarah observed the bear through her binoculars. The animal was massive up close, easily 300 pounds, her black fur glistening with morning dew. The wound on her left side was clearly visible now, a series of deep gashes that looked suspiciously like claw marks. Visual established. Tom's voice came quietly through the radio. "Sarah, are you seeing this? Her movement pattern." "I see it," Sarah replied, her mind already working through possibilities. The bear wasn't just standing her ground. She was moving in a precise pattern, keeping herself between the rangers and a specific section of the rocky outcrop behind her. Every time she shifted position, it was with clear purpose, maintaining that protective barrier. Sarah had seen this behavior before, but never in such an extreme form. Maternal instinct was powerful in black bears, but this level of determination, especially while injured, was extraordinary. "Tom," she whispered into her radio, "I need you to circle around, stay well back, and tell me if you can see any cave openings or natural dens in that rock face. Jack, be ready with the tranquilizer gun if she charges, but hold your fire unless absolutely necessary." Tom acknowledged and began moving with admirable stealth through the underbrush. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the bear, noting every detail of its behavior. The way it constantly checked its surroundings, the careful positioning, the focused attention. It all pointed to one conclusion, but she needed confirmation. Several tense minutes passed, broken only by the soft calls of early morning birds and the whisper of wind through the pines. Finally, Tom's voice crackled through the radio. "Sarah, I've got visual on a small opening, about 15 feet up the rock face, and I can hear something inside, something small." The pieces clicked into place. Sarah's heart rate quickened as she realized what they were dealing with. "It's a den," she breathed, switching channels to alert base camp. "And I'd bet my badge there's a cub in there." Jack's sharp intake of breath carried clearly over the radio. They all knew what this meant. Their already complex situation had just become far more challenging. A mother bear protecting her cub was among the most dangerous wildlife encounters possible, even without the complication of injury. Sarah quickly organized her team into a strategic perimeter around the den site. With a potentially wounded cub in the equation, every decision carried extra weight. She pulled out her satellite phone and dialed Dr. Maya Patel, the park's chief wildlife veterinarian. "Maya, we've got a situation on Thunder Ridge. Mother bear injured defending what we believe is a den with at least one cub. We're going to need your expertise on this one." The veterinarian's response was immediate. "Text me your coordinates. I'll grab my field kit and be there in 20 minutes. Don't approach the den until I arrive." While waiting for Maya, Sarah gathered her team for a quick briefing. The morning sun had risen higher, burning off some of the mist and illuminating the scene in sharp detail. The mother bear continued her vigilant patrol, though Sarah noticed her movements becoming slightly sluggish. The blood loss was taking its toll. "Tom, what's your read on those injuries?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice low. The young ranger consulted his notes. 3 distinct gash marks on the left flank, each approximately 6 to 8 inches long, consistent with predator attack, possibly mountain lion based on the pattern and spacing. Jack nodded in agreement. "There's been a young male lion spotted in this area recently. 2 hikers reported seeing it near Broken Pine Junction last week." Sarah processed this information, her mind racing through scenarios. A mountain lion attack on a bear was unusual. The predators typically avoided each other. For one to risk attacking a full-grown black bear, something must have drawn it to the den. The sound of boots on gravel announced Maya's arrival. The veterinarian moved with practiced efficiency, her silver hair tied back in a tight braid, her weathered face serious as she assessed the situation. At 58, Maya had spent over 3 decades treating wildlife across national parks, and her expertise was legendary among rangers across the state. "Talk to me," she said, setting down her medical kit and pulling out her binoculars. Sarah quickly briefed her on their observations and theories. Maya listened intently, her experienced eyes never leaving the bear as she took in every detail of its condition and behavior. "The cub's cries," Maya said after a moment. "Tom, you said you heard something from the den. Describe exactly what you heard." Tom closed his eyes, recalling the sound. High-pitched whimpering, very faint. Irregular intervals. Maybe every few minutes. Maya's expression grew more concerned. That timing suggests distress. Could be hunger, could be injury. Either way, we need to assess that cub soon. She turned to Sarah. "How long has the mother been maintaining this guard?" First reports came in around dawn, so at least 3 hours now. With those injuries and this level of exertion, Maya shook her head. "She's running on pure adrenaline and maternal instinct. We've got maybe 2 hours before she collapses from blood loss and exhaustion." The gravity of the situation settled over the team. If the mother bear collapsed, accessing the den would become easier, but the trauma to both mother and cub would be severe. They needed to act before that happened. Sarah gathered her team closer, speaking in hushed tones. "Okay, here's what we know. We have an injured mother bear defending a den with at least one cub in distress. The mother's wounds appear to be from a mountain lion attack, suggesting the predator might have been trying to access the den. The cub's condition is unknown, but the sounds indicate distress. Our window for intervention is narrow." She paused, looking each team member in the eye. "This isn't just about managing a wildlife incident anymore. We're dealing with a mother fighting to protect her young against impossible odds. We owe it to her courage to do this right." Maya was already preparing her medical supplies, laying out everything she might need for both mother and cub. "I've got enough tranquilizer for the mother's estimated weight, but we'll need to be precise with the dosage. In her weakened state, we can't risk over-sedation." "How long will the sedation last?" Tom asked, his notebook out. 30 minutes, maybe 40, Maya replied. "That's our window to treat her wounds and check on the cub." Sarah made her decision. "All right, here's the plan. We'll set up a 3-team approach. Maya and I will handle the mother's sedation and treatment. Tom, you and Jack will be our den team. Once the mother's sedated, you'll assess and retrieve the cub if necessary. Rodriguez and Mitchell will maintain perimeter security. We can't risk any civilian interference." The team nodded, each understanding their role. Sarah looked again at the mother bear, still maintaining her protective vigil despite her obvious pain. In 2 decades of wildlife service, she'd never seen such raw determination, such unflinching courage in the face of overwhelming odds. The next hour unfolded in a careful dance of observation and preparation. Maya set up a mobile medical station behind the natural barrier of a fallen Douglas fir, laying out her equipment with practiced precision. Antibiotics, wound cleaning supplies, suture kits, and monitoring equipment. Each item was meticulously arranged, ready for quick access once they managed to sedate the mother bear. "These wound patterns are telling a story," Maya said, studying the bear through her high-powered spotting scope. She gestured for Sarah to look. "See how the gashes angle upward? The mountain lion attacked from below, probably while the bear was entering or leaving the den." Sarah peered through the scope, noting the details Maya pointed out. The mother bear's black fur was matted with dried blood around 3 distinct claw marks, each cutting deep into her left flank. Despite the severity of her injuries, the bear maintained her protective stance, though her movements were becoming increasingly labored. "The location is strategic too," Tom added, pointing to a topographical map he'd spread out on a flat rock. "This den site is halfway up the ridge, with good drainage and multiple escape routes." She chose well. Jack, who'd been monitoring the bear's behavior patterns, joined their huddle. "Movement radius is shrinking," he reported, showing them his observation notes. "Started at about 15 feet from the den entrance, now down to maybe 8. She's losing strength." Maya's face tightened with concern. "We need to move soon. Those wounds are already showing signs of infection. See the inflammation around the edges? And in this heat," she glanced at the sun, now high overhead, "she's at risk of severe dehydration." Sarah did a final equipment check, her mind running through their intervention plan. The tranquilizer gun was loaded with the precise dosage Maya had calculated based on the bear's estimated weight and condition. They had backup darts ready, though everyone hoped they wouldn't be necessary. In the mother's weakened state, calculating safe sedation was a delicate balance. "Talk me through the cubs again," Sarah said to Maya. "What are we potentially dealing with?" The veterinarian pulled out a reference guide, flipping to a section on black bear reproduction. "Based on the time of year and that den location, I'd estimate the cub is very young, possibly only 2 to 3 weeks old. Eyes might still be closed. At that age, they're completely dependent on their mother's milk and body heat for survival, which means every minute we take is critical," Tom concluded, his young face serious. Sarah nodded, then gathered the team for a final briefing. The morning had brought more hikers to the park, and she could hear Rodriguez on the radio, coordinating with park security to maintain the evacuation zone. They couldn't risk any disturbances during the intervention. "Maya will take point on medical decisions," Sarah announced, making eye contact with each team member. "Once the mother is sedated, we move fast but careful. Tom and Jack, you'll handle the den assessment, full safety gear, no exceptions. We don't know if that mountain lion might return, and we can't rule out other cubs or complications in the den." She turned to Maya. "How long will we have?" "Ideally, 40 minutes of full sedation," Maya replied, double-checking her calculations. "After that, she'll start coming around. We need to be clear of the area before that happens. A groggy bear with a cub is not a situation we want to handle." The team spent the next 20 minutes setting up their equipment and running through emergency scenarios. Sarah had worked with bears for decades, but she'd never seen this level of maternal dedication. The mother's unflagging protection of her cub, even while grievously injured, spoke to something profound about the power of maternal instinct. Through her binoculars, Sarah watched the bear sway slightly, catching herself and resuming her guard. Time was running out. They needed to act soon, or the mother's determination to protect her cub might cost both their lives. "Look at her eyes," Maya murmured, standing beside Sarah. Even now, barely able to stand, she's completely focused on protecting that den. "Makes you wonder who the higher species really is, doesn't it?" Sarah thought about all the human mothers she knew, about her own mother's sacrifices. "Love is love," she said quietly. "Maybe that's all there is to it." The radio crackled with Rodriguez's voice. "Perimeter secure, boss. No civilian activity within half a mile." Sarah took a deep breath, looking at her assembled team. Years of training, decades of combined experience, all focused on saving this fierce mother and her vulnerable cub. "Okay, people, let's do this right. On my mark, we begin phase 1 of the intervention." The mid-morning sun beat down on Thunder Ridge as Sarah's team gathered at their makeshift command center. A light breeze carried the scent of pine and sage through the air, along with the distant sound of a helicopter. Park administration had sent up an aerial unit to monitor the situation from above and ensure no other predators were in the immediate area. "Latest thermal imaging from the chopper," Jack said, spreading out a tablet displaying heat signature maps. "Confirming what we suspected, single heat signature in the den, consistent with a small cub. But there's something else." He zoomed in on the image, pointing to a faint heat trail leading away from the den site. "See this? Residual heat signature, probably from our mountain lion. Trail's still warm, meaning it could be nearby." Sarah studied the thermal map, her expression grave. The situation was becoming more complex by the minute. Not only did they have an injured mother and potentially distressed cub to deal with, but the threat of a returning predator added another layer of urgency to their intervention. Maya finished her latest round of observations and joined the group, her medical kit clutched tightly in her weathered hands. "The mother's condition is deteriorating faster than I anticipated," she reported, pulling out her notebook filled with detailed behavioral observations. "Core temperatures likely elevated due to infection setting in. Notice how she's panting more frequently now? And her rear legs are trembling when she maintains a stationary position." Tom, who'd been monitoring the bear's movements through a spotting scope, added his observations. Movement radius has decreased another 2 feet in the last 30 minutes. She's also showing signs of disorientation. Took her longer to respond to that last J call. Sarah processed this information, her mind racing through potential scenarios and their corresponding risks. 20 years of wildlife management experience had taught her that in situations like this, there was rarely a perfect solution. Every choice carried its own set of dangers. "Walk me through our options, Maya," she said, pulling out her own field notebook. "What are we looking at in terms of medical intervention?" The veterinarian laid out her medical supplies on a clean tarp, each item meticulously organized. "Given her size and current condition, I've prepared 3 different sedation protocols." She pointed to 3 separate injection kits. "Standard dose would be this one, enough to sedate her for 40 minutes. But with her weakened state, I'm concerned about cardiovascular stress." "What about a lighter dose?" Jack suggested. "Just enough to make her groggy?" Maya shook her head. "Too risky. We need her fully sedated to treat those wounds properly. They're deep, going to need thorough cleaning and probably sutures. Can't do that with a partially conscious bear." Sarah walked a few paces away from the group, her boots crunching on pine needles as she surveyed the scene again. The mother bear had managed to shift positions, still keeping herself between the den and any potential threats. But the movement was clearly causing her pain. Every protective instinct in Sarah's body wanted to rush in and help, but rush decisions with wildlife rarely ended well. "Okay," she said, returning to the group. "Let's break this down step by step. Maya, what's your timeline for intervention?" The veterinarian consulted her notes. "Based on current deterioration rate, we have maybe 2 hours before she goes into serious shock. Once that happens, survival chances drop significantly for both mother and cub." Tom raised his hand slightly, a habit from his recent training days that he hadn't quite shaken. "What about the cub's condition? Those sounds I heard earlier have changed, less frequent now." This observation sent a new wave of concern through the group. Maya quickly flipped through her wildlife veterinary manual. At this time of year, cubs are entirely dependent on their mothers. If she hasn't been able to nurse properly due to her injuries, she didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone understood the implications. Sarah took a deep breath, then began outlining their intervention plan on a fresh page of her notebook. "We need multiple teams working in coordination. Maya, you'll lead the medical team. Focus on the mother's treatment. Tom and Jack, you'll handle cub assessment and potential extraction. Rodriguez and Mitchell will maintain perimeter security and keep an eye out for that mountain lion." She turned to where their equipment was laid out. "Full safety gear for everyone. Radio checks every 5 minutes. We'll set up a medical station here." She pointed to a relatively flat area behind a large boulder, "and a cub assessment station over there under that Douglas fir. If we need to separate mother and cub temporarily, we want minimum distance between them." The team gathered around as Sarah drew a rough diagram of their positions and planned movements. Every detail needed to be perfect. The slightest mistake could have devastating consequences for both bears. "One more thing," Sarah added, her voice taking on an edge of steel that her team recognized from previous crisis situations. "We're not just dealing with an injured animal here. We're dealing with a mother who's shown extraordinary courage protecting her cub. She deserves our absolute best. Every decision, every action we take needs to honor that courage. Are we clear?" The team nodded solemnly. Even Tom, usually quick with questions, remained silent, understanding the gravity of what they were about to attempt. Maya began preparing her medical supplies with practiced efficiency. "I'll need about 15 minutes to get everything ready. Sarah, can you help me double-check these dosage calculations?" As the team broke into their assigned tasks, Sarah caught Jack's eye. Her old friend and colleague had seen enough wildlife interventions to know when one would haunt them. His slight nod told her he was thinking the same thing. This wasn't just another day on the job. This was one of those moments that would stick with them one way or another. Word travels fast in small towns, and Pine Valley was no exception. By mid-morning, the parking lot at Thunder Ridge Trailhead had transformed into an impromptu gathering place. Local news vans lined the perimeter, their satellite dishes reaching toward the clear mountain sky, while clusters of townspeople gathered in hushed conversation. Eleanor Thompson, who ran the Pine Valley Coffee Shop, had arrived with 3 large thermoses of coffee and a box of still-warm muffins for the Ranger team. Her husband Joe, known to everyone as Old Joe, stood at the edge of the lot, his weathered face creased with concern. After 40 years as a park ranger before his retirement, he knew better than anyone the challenges the team faced. "Reminds me of the Wilson Creek incident back in '92, Old Joe said to the small group gathered around him. His voice, though softened by age, still carried the authority of experience. Female grizzly that time, not a black bear, but same kind of situation. Mother protecting her young against all odds. Lisa Chun, who taught environmental science at Pine Valley High School, had brought her entire advanced placement class to observe the operation from a safe distance. This is wildlife management in real time, she explained to her students, who were taking detailed notes. Everything we've discussed in class about habitat preservation and human-wildlife interaction is playing out right here." Among the gathered crowd, Martin Reynolds, the local veterinarian, spoke quietly with his colleague Dr. James Whitney from the Pine Valley Animal Hospital. They'd both offered their facilities and expertise if needed, understanding that situations like this required all available resources. "I've got the surgical suite prepped," Martin said, running a hand through his graying hair. "Called in my entire staff. If Maya needs backup or specialized equipment, we're ready." The growing crowd caught the attention of Rangers Rodriguez and Mitchell, who were maintaining the security perimeter. Mitchell approached a group that had ventured too close to the trail entrance. "Folks, I understand you want to help, but we need to maintain this safety zone," he explained firmly but kindly. "Bears can move deceptively fast, even when injured. We can't risk any civilian presence closer than this point." Near the ranger station, Judy Martinez, Tom's wife and the editor of the Pine Valley Gazette, was coordinating with other local media outlets. As a journalist, she understood the importance of responsible reporting in wildlife situations. "No dramatic headlines," she instructed her junior reporter, Andy. "We're not here to sensationalize. This is about wildlife conservation and professional rangers doing their jobs. And absolutely no approaching the operation area for photos. We use the telephoto lenses or nothing at all." The sound of children's voices drew attention to a new arrival. Emily Watson, the elementary school art teacher, had brought supplies from her classroom. She set up a small table where younger children could draw pictures and write notes for the brave bear mama, as they'd taken to calling her. "It helps them process their concern," Emily explained to a nearby parent. "Children have such natural empathy for animals. This is their way of feeling involved." The morning wore on, and more townspeople arrived. Pete Harrison from the local hardware store brought additional lighting equipment in case the operation extended into dusk. The owners of Mountain View Restaurant set up a food station, ensuring the ranger team and support staff would have proper meals. Old Joe made his way through the crowd to where Sarah was reviewing thermal imaging data. She looked up as he approached, respect evident in her expression. He'd been her first mentor when she'd started as a ranger 20 years ago. "Everything about this situation is backwards, Sarah," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the trail leading to the bear. "Black bears, they're supposed to run. That's what makes them different from grizzlies. When they stand their ground like this," he shook his head. "Something profound is happening here." Sarah nodded, grateful for his insight. "Any advice?" The old ranger was quiet for a moment, considering. "Trust your instincts. You've got good ones. And remember, sometimes the most human thing we can do is recognize when an animal is showing us what humanity really means." The crowd's murmuring suddenly quieted as Maya's voice came through Sarah's radio. "Sarah, we need to move now. The mother's showing signs of severe distress." The gathered townspeople watched in tense silence as the ranger team quickly mobilized. Old Joe's words hung in the air, giving voice to what everyone felt. They were witnessing something extraordinary, a demonstration of maternal courage that transcended species. Linda Cooper, Jack's wife and the town's elementary school principal, led her students in putting up the signs they'd made: "Stay strong, Mama Bear," and Pine Valley supports our rangers. The community's concern was palpable, their collective hope focusing on the drama unfolding up on Thunder Ridge. As Sarah gathered her team for the intervention, she glanced back at the assembled crowd. In her 20 years as a ranger, she'd never seen the community come together quite like this. Somehow, this injured mother bear's determination to protect her cub had touched something deep in the town's collective consciousness, reminding them of the connections that bound all living things. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they put their plan into motion. Sarah took point with the tranquilizer gun, while Maya prepared her medical equipment. Tom and 2 other rangers positioned themselves near the den, ready to check on the cub once the mother was safely sedated. The mother bear's exhaustion worked in their favor. Her reactions were slower, though her protective instinct remained fierce. Sarah waited for the perfect moment, her breath steady, her hands sure on the tranquilizer gun. The bear swayed again, and Sarah squeezed the trigger. The dart found its mark. The mother bear lurched, her eyes wild with fear and determination. For several heart-stopping minutes, she fought the sedative, trying to stay on her feet, still positioning herself between the rangers and her cub. "She's incredible," Maya whispered, watching the bear's struggle. Even now, her only thought is protecting her baby. Finally, the mother bear's legs buckled. The rangers moved in swiftly but respectfully, Maya immediately beginning treatment while Tom's team accessed the den. Sarah stayed with the mother, speaking softly to the unconscious animal, her hand gentle on the bear's thick fur. The cub was tiny, barely 2 weeks old, its eyes still closed. Tom carefully extracted it from the den, cradling it in a warm blanket. The baby bear whimpered, a sound that touched something deep in everyone present. Maya's initial examination of the cub showed it was healthy but hungry. The mother's injuries had likely prevented her from nursing properly for hours. They worked quickly, knowing time was critical for both bears. As word spread about the cub's rescue, the community's response grew stronger. Local wildlife experts offered assistance, and the Pine Valley Veterinary Clinic volunteered their facilities and supplies. Even the children of Pine Valley Elementary School got involved, creating get-well cards for the brave bear mama. The story touched something fundamental in people's hearts, a recognition of the fierce, unconditional love of a mother for her child, transcending species boundaries. It reminded everyone that in nature's grand design, the instinct to protect and nurture was universal. The next few days were critical. The mother bear and cub were transported to a secure wildlife rehabilitation facility, where Maya and her team worked tirelessly. The mother's wounds were severe but treatable. The mountain lion's attack had come close to vital organs but missed them. Donations poured in from across the country as the story gained national attention. Wildlife photographers shared stunning images of black bears in the park, educating the public about these magnificent animals and their importance to the ecosystem. The incident became a catalyst for change. The Park Service implemented new educational programs about wildlife protection, and the town of Pine Valley established an annual festival celebrating the region's black bears. Local schools incorporated more environmental education into their curricula, inspired by the mother bear's story. Sarah found herself increasingly invited to speak at community events, sharing not just the story but others from her years of ranger service. She saw how one bear's courage had opened hearts and minds to larger conversations about conservation and coexistence. 6 weeks later, on a crisp morning much like the day of the rescue, Sarah and her team prepared for the bear's release. The mother had healed well, her strength returned, and the cub had grown into a playful ball of fur. They would be released in a secure area of the park, far from hiking trails but in prime bear habitat. The mother bear emerged from her transport cage cautiously, her cub following close behind. Sarah watched as they paused at the forest's edge, the mother bear's nose testing the air. In that moment, illuminated by early sunlight, they seemed to embody the very spirit of the wilderness, resilient, untamed, and free. A year later, hikers occasionally reported sighting a large female black bear with a healthy yearling cub in the remote sections of the park. While they couldn't be certain it was the same pair, Sarah liked to think it was them, thriving in their natural habitat. The incident had left an indelible mark on the community. The Thunder Ridge Trail now featured educational signage about black bears and their conservation, and local businesses proudly displayed Bear Aware certificates, showing their commitment to wildlife-conscious practices. But perhaps the most significant change was in people's hearts. The mother bear's story had reminded them that courage, love, and the will to protect one's family were not uniquely human traits. In her fierce dedication to her cub, she had shown them a mirror of their own capacity for sacrifice and devotion. As Sarah walked the Thunder Ridge Trail on her regular patrols, she often paused at the spot where it had all happened. The rocky outcrop remained unchanged, but the place felt different now, sacred almost, marked by an act of extraordinary maternal courage that had transformed not just two bears' lives, but an entire community's understanding of what it meant to be wild, to be brave, and to be a mother. End of story.